Chapter 2 Keyblade. A town known as the Crossroads was one of the main centers of Keyblade activity on the outskirts of the frontier. It was here that the large body of Dawn Treaders took sanctuary from their endeavors, marching through the wilderness. After the dismissal, the Dawn Treaders withdrew to their respected shelters. Stratus and his comrades were stationed at a prominent establishment of the town. Their accommodations were basic at best, very rustic in their appearance, with only the bare essentials needed for them to sleep and to refresh themselves.
Another day on patrol completed,
Terrain said as he stretched himself out on his bed.
Exhausting and boring as usual.
Only a few skirmishes with those shadow creatures,
Valor added, as he unhinged his keyblade from his belt. The keyblade wielders made themselves comfortable, almost forgetting that there was one other amongst them now. Sora was a little hesitant to enter the room of his inquisitors. "Come in," Stratus said. "Make yourself at home."
I feel like I'm intruding, though,
Sora uttered.
I don't wish to inconvenience you.
"It's not like you have a choice. Where would you go?"
I don't know.
Sora entered the room and sat down in a chair stationed at the large round table. "Now that we're here," Stratus said as he sat down, "I think it best that we have a formal introduction. I'm Stratus, as you probably know already." The silver-haired youth introduced each of his comrades. "The little guy with the sandy hair is Terrain, my younger brother." Terrain only smiled as he sat lax on the bed. "The tall man in gray is Valor."
a pleasure.
Valor replied.
Nice to meet you.
Sora said. "And the guy over there with his arms folded," Stratus continued. "That's our fourth comrade in arms, Veritas." Unlike the others, Veritas gave no gesture of greeting. He maintained a steady, unwavering glare at Sora, which made the youth feel uneasy.
I'm Sora.
Sora openly declared.
So he remembers his name?
Terrain asked Stratus.
Well, that's good. It's nice to meet you, Sora.
Huh, Veritas huffed. "So he suddenly remembers his name, does he?"
Is there something wrong with that?
"Just an hour ago, this guy didn't even know his name. And now he suddenly remembers? Rather abrupt, don't you think? It's like he plucked it out of thin air." "That'll do, Veritas," Stratus said. The mere utterances made by Stratus were enough to make Veritas hold his tongue and turn away. "Forgive Veritas. He's usually a very open and friendly guy. He's just not accustomed to having strangers suddenly intrude in our affairs. Especially now."
Why's that?
Sora asked. "Well," there was a sudden silence before Stratus began speaking again. "Right now was a very tense time to be a Keyblade wielder in general.
How come?
You probably may not be aware of this, but our various worlds consist of light and darkness. We, as Keyblade wielders, act as guardians to the realm of light. So we battle against the darkness with our special arms, the Keyblade. The Keyblade is the only weapon that can successfully fend off the dark shadows for good, releasing hearts from their clutches. But we, in the realm of light, are having our own problems."
What's that?
Sora was perked in his curiousness. "Our supreme leader," Stratus continued, "the Master of Masters, had vanished from this world, leaving 5 of his apprentices, the Foretellers, in charge of 5 unions. The 5 were meant to work together to fend off the darkness, but recently there has been rousing suspicion coming from the 5 unions against each other. That's why I reinstated the Dawn Treaders, to act as peacekeepers and guardians of the light, as our forebears had done. However, we have gained even more enemies than the 5 unions have.
It's because we're looked on as meddling in the affairs of the individual unions, like a police force.
Valor added.
In many cases, interfering with the conflicts of the unions has caused us to become targets of ridicule and suspicion, branding us villains, and has raised a lot of bad blood against us.
We've even had Keyblade wielders try to break us up and figure us out from the inside, trying to infiltrate into our ranks,
Terrain stated. That's the reason why I have my suspicions about you, Veritas declared. You're an outsider. How do we know what you've told us is true? You forgot everything about yourself only an hour ago. Now you suddenly remember your name? I wonder, how much more are you concealing?
I'm not hiding anything,
Sora replied, trying to defend himself.
I wish I could tell you more, but I can't.
That's what they all say. Veritas, please, Stratus pleaded. We can't verify if what Sora has been telling us is the truth or not. And what makes you so sure this guy is telling the truth? I don't know, Stratus sighed. I wish I did, but I don't have the power of foresight. I can only deduce as I go along. Stratus addressed again. I hope you can understand the uncertainties surrounding you, Sora, which is why a few of the Dawn Treaders haven't embraced you or your presence with open arms. You'll have to gain their favor. You'll have to achieve all our trust wholeheartedly.
But how can I do that?
Sora asked. No further explanation was given, as the silence of the waxing dusk gave way to the sound of shouting outside the window. At the same time, panicked footsteps came rushing up the stairs. The door swung open, presenting a young Dawn Treader, keyblade in hand and out of breath.
Sir!
He shouted.
The shadows are attacking!
How many are there? Stratus asked.
It's a full-scale attack. Every Keyblade wielder is out there battling as we speak.
Very well. Stratus grabbed his kepi and placed it on his head. We're off! But no sooner had he uttered the order to deploy, the shadows suddenly appeared in their quarters, their twitching bodies, tweaking antennae, and glowing yellow eyes grew in number.
Oh, not in our room,
Terrain groaned, joining his comrades. Lead the shadows outside, Stratus ordered. Sora, stay close.
Right,
Sora replied as he fell back behind the Dawn Treaders. Several of the entities lunged at the group, only to be struck down by Veritas. Let's get going, he shouted. Down the hall, descending the stairs, and through the inn, the 4 engaged in combat. Large number of shadows came upon them, striking from every direction. Yet the professionalism of the Dawn Treaders outdid their fear. They made their way out of the establishment, all the while witnessing Keyblade wielders from all aspects, fighting off the shadows to the best of their abilities.
I've never seen an attack this big on any one settlement,
Valor said, as he struck down several of the shadowy entities. Bring the battle outside, Stratus ordered. We don't want to damage the establishment. The melee intensified as Keyblade wielders went head-to-head in close-quarter combat with the Dark Specters. We have to assemble as many Dawn Treaders as we can, Veritas bellowed. Draw these creatures to the square of the center of town, Valor shouted. Dawn Treaders assemble there! From out of the woodwork, Dawn Treaders from the outfit began to collect in the town square. Form a firing line, Stratus shouted. Form a firing line! Slowly, the assembled Dawn Treaders established a tight circle in the middle of the town square, All the while, other Keyblade wielders confronted the shadows in clusters and fending off their foes as best they could. Amongst them were Sora and Terrain. Terrain doing his best to protect Sora.
Terrain!
Sora cried.
We have to get to the Dawn Treader's circle.
Right, Terrain replied. Both youths ran as fast as they could to the sanctity of the defensive circle. But in the rush, Terrain suddenly tripped over a raised cobblestone and fell to the ground. Stratus saw his brother fall and witnessed a wave of shadows ready to throw themselves upon him en masse. Terrain! Stratus cried. Sora turned around to see Terrain on the ground, his foe swiftly encroaching on him.
Terrain! I'm coming!
Sora shouted. Even though he had no weapon of his own, he instinctively rushed out to the youth's aid. Terrain looked behind him to see the shadows coming upon him like a wave against the shore. He raised his Keyblade before him to guard against the entities, but he knew the act to be in vain. Sora, desperate to help his comrade, rushed in front of Terrain, acting as a shield. All the while, however, Stratus and the others watched a bizarre phenomenon unfold before them. Sora's hand began to glow. He vanished into the fray of shadows. Suddenly, there was an explosion of light which repulsed many of the shadows that consumed the youths. All present were awestruck with the sight before them. Then Sora stood in defense of Terrain. In his hand was a Keyblade. The appearance of the Keyblade in Sora's hand caused mixed emotions amongst the Dawn Treaders.
I won't let you hurt Terrain!
Sora shouted. More shadows advanced, only to be struck down in a flurry of moves which all thought Sora incapable of.
Sora,
Terrain uttered.
how did you... Now's not the time, Terrain. Let's get to the circle.
Helping Terrain to his feet, Sora and his comrade rushed to the safety of the condensed Dawn Treader circle. Commence firing! Stratus shouted.
Fire!
Valor roared. Fire! Veritas added. A barrage of elemental fireballs blasted out into the ranks of the oncoming shadow hordes. Keep up your fire! Stratus ordered. Sporadic outbursts of elemental attacks tore apart the ranks of the shadows, either in volleys or by individual casting. Some areas of the circle were breached, and the Keyblade wielders found themselves once again in close hand-to-hand combat with the dark entities. Eventually, however, the ranks of the shadowy foes thinned, and eventually vanished from sight, leaving a small town, its inhabitants, and all the Keyblade wielders stationed there traumatized from the incident. Is everyone all right? Stratus asked. We have a few casualties here, one of the Dawn Treaders declared. At least 30 wounded.
Nothing some potion can't cure.
Valor reassured them.
Any fatalities?
None amongst us so far.
What about the populace?
Still unconfirmed, sir. It's unusual, Stratus said. I've never known those creatures to attack a settlement in large numbers like that before.
They took us completely by surprise,
Another Dawn Treader added. I wonder why that was. I'll tell you why, Veritas suddenly bellowed. It has to be because of that guy. He immediately pointed his blade at Sora.
Sora?
Terrain questioned. What do you think? Veritas' conviction was steadfast. In all the times that we have been stationed here at the crossroads, we've never once had an incident like this occur. And yet, out of the blue, this guy appears, and suddenly this town becomes a target to one of the biggest shadow offenses ever witnessed. Veritas' remarks held truth for some of the Keyblade wielders. Their endeavors had not been pushed to the brink of such desperation until Sora was suddenly discovered. It has to be that guy, one Dawn Treader added.
His presence is a curse upon us,
Another stated. Soon, a number of Dawn Treaders surrounded Sora, whose Keyblade by this time had vanished from sight. He looked about in fear as suddenly those whom he had fought alongside with now turned their weapons on him.
I didn't do anything, he said. I saw Terrain in danger. I needed to help him.
But Sora's statements were unheeded by the roused mob now cutting off any way for him to escape.
Stop!
Terrain shouted as he pushed his way through the crowd of vigilantes and placed himself between them and Sora.
Leave Sora alone. He didn't do anything wrong.
Wrong, Veritas declared. As far as we know, he was probably the one who summoned those monsters here. A barrage of agreements echoed amongst the crowd.
Well, if Sora was meant to harm us,
Terrain continued,
then why did he jump in front of me to save me?
There was a silence and a murmur as the realization of Sora's deed came to fruition. He might be planning to gain our trust, one anonymous Dawn Treader retaliated. That way we'll drop our guard.
Well, if that's the case, then doesn't that apply to all of us?
Terrain's statement held water as much as Veritas.
How do I know that a number of you have convictions as strong as you claim them to be?
Suddenly, Dawn Treader started to question whether Veritas was right, or was simply jumping to conclusions. Enough, Stratus declared. These rumors and speculations are the reason why this rift among us and between the other unions exists. I will not allow this suspicion to tear us apart as well. Then how do you propose that we settle this? Veritas stated.
Perhaps there is one way.
Valor interjected.
We could summon the wizard.
The wizard?
Sora wondered.
Yes, the wizard. A man who has seen the distant past as well as the distant future. Some say that he knows more of the future beyond the Book of Prophecies. They say even the Master of Masters pales in comparison to this man.
That may be all well and good, Veritas declared. But how do you plan on finding him? That wizard is as elusive as they come. Tracking him down would be futile. I know where to find him, Stratus assured them. But it will take some time. Until then, Stratus approached Sora. I'm sorry to say this, Sora, but you will be placed under house arrest until I return.
What?
Sora was shocked.
Why? He saved my life, brother, Terrain added. Why do we have to treat Sora like a criminal?
I want to believe him, Terrain. I really do. And it is because he saved your life that I wish for nothing better for Sora than his freedom. But I must also consider having to ease the fears of our comrades. You and I might be willing to trust Sora, but many others, Veritas included, are still suspicious of him. If they are not given confirmation, we will only be causing more rifts in our ranks to form. You'll just have to be patient. Stratus turned to Sora and put his hand on his shoulder. I will do all that I can to help you. But for now, do as I ask, and stay in our quarters until I have received confirmation from the wizard. Can you at least do that for me, Sora?
I will,
Sora reluctantly said. His eyes were averted. Thank you. Stratus turned to Valor. Take him to our quarters, Valor.
Understood,
Valor replied. He escorted Sora back to the inn, an entourage of Dawn Treaders following in the wake. Stratus turned to continue his journey to find the wizard, but not before confronting Veritas. You know as well as I, Stratus declared, standing parallel to his comrade without making eye contact. The wizard is all-knowing. I know that for a fact, Veritas replied. Then let me ask you this. When I return with the confirmation, regardless of its nature, will you put this matter to rest?
I will.
However, if Sora does prove to be the cause of all of this, I will dispatch him myself, Stratus assured him. We cannot have a dissenter here to cause any rifts, even if my brother objects. But if Sora is innocent and has told us nothing but the truth up to this point, then you will give me your word that you won't begrudgingly look at him with any further ill intent or suspicion. You will erase them from your mind. Understood? Only if he is innocent will I purge all thoughts of ill will from my mind. I hold you to your vow, Veritas. With that, Stratus departed from the crossroads to find the elusive wizard. Wait! Veritas shouted. Are you going now? It's almost dark, and the wilderness outside the town will be crawling with those creatures. The wizard is close, Stratus declared. I must away to him now. If I wait until dawn, his whereabouts will vanish again. Then take care, Veritas replied. He watched as Stratus vanished from the well-lit streets to the vast darkness before him. End of Chapter 2.